Monster-in-Law, Part 3 My Monstrous Background Wedding. This is a 6-part series of the same story, of which you are listening to Part 3 of 6. Let's get started.
So, for anyone keeping up with the story so far, we were just beginning to learn about Ms. Monster. The longer she stuck around, the more we were going to find out about her. And for anyone wondering, by this time in the story, we already had one of the 2 little dogs I mentioned in my previous report. I didn't bring that piece up because it was annoying, but more of an inconvenience to my Phil, if anything, even though he now has one of the said dogs and loves her to pieces. So anyone wondering about the dog thing? Basically, Monster refused to marry my Phil until he bought her a dog because her ex-husband had a Doberman that supposedly belonged to her, and she missed her. So to make up for that, she got a golden retriever pup, knowing she wouldn't take care of it. What do I mean by that? Since day one, she would tell people, "I can't clean up poop because the smell makes me vomit." My Bill worked a half hour away from home and worked night shift, so he was asleep most of the day and wouldn't be able nor want to take care of a dog that she wanted. So because of this, knowing my father worked 12 plus hours at sometimes 6 days a week, she got rid of the dog. Commendable, but here is the next issue. She got another dog who was smaller and harder to handle. Then made my Phil clean after the dog, to the point where we would come over there and the dogs would be covered in pee and pooped in the kennel multiple times. She refused to take care of them, but let them run around in their feces for 12 plus hours, then yelled at my dad to clean after them when he got home from an exhausting medical shift. Shortly after this story, she gets a second dog, similar in the breed to the first, some kind of Yorkie mix, and tried to breed them for profit. Now she posted that she would be using this money to send to charity, but scammed everyone that she gave the dogs to and kept the money for herself. Not sure if she did it to anyone on her side of the family, but the few on our side we managed to talk to told us she told them one amount of money, then kept increasing it multiple times to keep getting money off them. My dad was furious. Yeah, another big pet peeve of mine, but I didn't bring it up in detail, hoping to do a full explanation like this in this part. So thanks for your patience. Anyway, back to the story. I found out pretty early that my MIL sister was still on excellent speaking terms with my Phil. The house he was staying in was actually MIL's childhood home. So when she passed away, there were thankfully things kept in the garage that belonged to MIL's sister. Jewelry and such. However, because Monster was too scared to ever see MIL's sister, she never allowed her to come over to the house to reclaim said items that my Phil wanted to give back. Flash forward a bit closer to the wedding, and Monster was trying to sell junk in the garage to make money so they could help us with costs for the wedding. You can probably already tell where this is going. I remember her holding the jewelry in her hands, claiming that she wanted to keep them because they were beautiful. Note, by this time, I was never told that the jewelry belonged to anyone. This was found out months later when running into my aunt in a fast food restaurant, by coincidence. She also told me about how Monster never allowed her over because she was scared of meeting her. I can't say that she sold or stole the jewelry because I wasn't there when the sale took place. But I never saw that box of her things ever again. The Monster was also notorious for scam deals. I can't tell you how many cars they bought during their relationship, only to be sold off because they couldn't afford the payments. One such car was a Jeep that she had bought for my Phil's birthday. He was crazy about Jeeps and loved that thing more than anything. However, as soon as he had it, she sold it off, crushing my father even more than he had ever been before. I can still remember one of my husband's cousins coming up to him, asking his uncle why he looked so sad all the time. One scam was she wanted to drive her car to the middle of a bad neighborhood and claim fraud, knowing it would get stolen if she left it there. Yeah, this was typical behavior we were coming to find. One such incident actually happened after my wedding, but I will explain it quickly before getting to the actual wedding because it relates. When my husband moved out, my Phil gave him his old Envoy. It wasn't new, it was pretty old and had a few problems here and there that needed fixing. But nothing so severe that my husband wanted to get rid of it. As a matter of fact, he protested the idea to Monster multiple times, but eventually she cracked him and they went out looking for a new car together. It would be around $2,000–3,000 to fix the Envoy with its latest issue, so they instead chipped in to buy my husband, our current Impala. Problem 1, my husband and I were having a lot of issues financially at this time and knew we couldn't afford a car payment, even with it only being almost $200.00 a month. One of the critical things brought up to Monster before she broke my poor husband. Problem 2, this car was so small compared to the vehicles my husband grew up driving, and he complained about it constantly when he first got this car. He was used to driving a minivan and a store van and an Envoy all his life. On top of that, they still shelled out the money to have the Envoy fixed and gave the car to her brother, friend, or whomever. Even worse still, my husband found out not even a day later the Envoy was totaled by said person and couldn't be used again. We were devastated because now we were stuck with a car that we could barely afford. But thankfully, that part is all taken taken care of now, and we plan on getting a bigger car for my husband since it is hard to fit 3 kids in one car. So onto the wedding portion. Again, please remember that a ton of things I am about to tell you lied to us from the start, and we didn't find out the truth until so much later when she would snap and shout everything out in a fit of rage. Starting off, she had apparently received a huge sum of money from her family inheritance or whatever. I am talking about over 60K kind of change. We assumed that she was really nice because instead of spending it on a bunch of stuff or saving it to pay off the house, she used it to help fix their yard and fund our wedding. Now I know what you're thinking, but Rose, this is super nice, why would that be a problem? For a couple of reasons, actually, but the main one being what we found out later. This woman, who poured her eyes out, trying to claim that she would do anything to get her children back, she was so hurt that they were wrongfully taken away from her, and Monster wanted to prove that she loved them more than anything in the world. Well, apparently, the entire reason why she got rid of this money so quickly wasn't to be so lovely. She had student debt and child support that she wasn't paying, and if the IRS caught wind of her money, they would take all of it. I don't know if you work for the IRS, government, or anything, but this is a huge problem. It shouldn't be done. If you have bills, just pay them to get them out of your hair. And what hit me hardest was the child support piece. Coming from a woman who begged, pleaded, and prayed to prove to her kids she loved them, not paying your child support. Now, before you get on me about how it was potentially wrong of her to be charged with that in the first place, I remind you the reason she lost her kids was because of her abusive tendencies. And it takes the courts a lot to remove a biological parent from the picture and give that child away to a non-biological parent with no visitation. Another thing that annoyed me was, wrong or not, you should have enough common sense to understand that child support is supposed to go towards making sure your children are well taken care of. Even if your spouse doesn't use the money for that purpose, it sets a profound message that despite being wronged, you are intentionally making an effort to care for your kids. Child support is one of those things that can help set this message. However, Monster went out of her way to make sure she didn't pay for this. Not exactly Mother of the Year either. She would even try to convince us later that it was because her ex-husband was rich and had plenty of money to care for those kids without her. I again point out that the message behind that funding should be that you want to help your kids, regardless of if you were wronged or not. Monster went out of her way to not pay this. It felt to me like she thought they weren't significant enough to get her help. Later, this also became a huge problem because she tried to use the kindness in her heart to blackmail people, claiming that she should be loved or respected because her money went to helping pay for a portion of the wedding and to fix that backyard. All things no one ever asked her to do, and she even refused money from my mother, who shelled out way more money on our wedding than Monster ever did. Now, a few things. She wanted to do something on the cheap, which I didn't really mind or care about. I personally don't prefer the gaudy style anyway. She claimed that she would grow all of the roses that I wanted for the bouquet instead of letting us just pay for a professional to do them. I had to remind her several hundred times which way I wanted it because of our theme. Personally, I made it as laid back as I could be. We didn't offer a dress code to the people attending, and even the people who were a part of the wedding weren't given strict guidelines. My bridesmaids were all allowed to choose whatever dress they wanted as long as they stuck to their color. If they weren't comfortable with heels, they wore flats or even tennis shoes to not fall over and hurt themselves. Everything was about being comfortable and coming together for the family. So I didn't mind her constantly telling me that she needed reminding of everything I had told her about before, but the one thing that irked me was my mother, and I worked hard to put together a guest list. There was a lot of family from out of town, and we knew they would need to be invited to the dinner party beforehand. So aside from offering money and her help in several situations, all can be proven by their FB messages going back and forth. Monster never accepted help from anyone on my side of the family, let alone my mother, which frustrated us come the time of the party because she made a very hurtful comment about not realizing there would be this many people. My mother sent her the headcount on just my side of the family. My favorite part about this was she was trying to make it sound like she was doing everything by herself. All this, despite all the people in and outside of my family who offered their help the entire time. We could have gone to a sit-down restaurant, but there were a ton of people who would be there, and to be frank, I told her how I was more comfortable with a backyard barbecue. Social anxiety in tow, I would prefer family together and not a bunch of strangers. So during our barbecue, she passed out at the grill because she overwhelmed herself with so much stuff to do, then tried to get pity for it by saying that she never had enough help. Another big flag came after my mother, and another patron of the barbecue told me what they had heard her say during the barbecue. She invited a few of her friends to this, which we didn't mind because they were lovely people. However, said person brought along her children, and anyone who read my comments before knows where this is going. After passing out, she went into the covered back porch to smoke weed for her anxiety. The kids had gone into the covered patio for whatever reason was unknown, probably to enter the house. But what people heard her tell these kids was astonishing. She was so high, she said to these kids, who at least 2 were under the age of 18, to take her medicinal weed and smoke it behind the garage, just don't tell the adults. Her trust in me was broken since hearing this from not only a woman I trust with my life but a family member I had only just met at that wedding from my husband's side of the family. I was appalled. I don't know what their parents do in their free time and it is not my place to judge, but my biggest fear was this. I want children at this point. If I ever let her watch them by herself, what will she give to them or make them do and then convince them that I shouldn't know about it? I was petrified. I had a few strange thoughts about this woman by this time, but never so bad that I would consider not trusting her. The biggest kicker was the honeymoon. This was the most uncomfortable conversation with this woman I think that I have ever had in my life. Now, most anyone reading this should surely know what the honeymoon is meant for. Mainly for two lovebirds who have been together for 5+ years at this point and wanted to start a family. It is not something that you take family trips on. But that is exactly what she kept trying to offer. Yeah, during this time, my husband and I already decided on going camping, which, as previously stated, was a huge love of ours. We could watch the endangered eagles' nests, raft out on the lake, fish, hike, and do many things that we love doing together. However, this was not clear to Monster-in-law. To start off, she wanted to just pay for plane tickets for a few of us to go off to Vegas and get hitched. Something I had told my parents and the in-laws that I was not comfortable with. My mother, aunt, and a few other people I know had done it this way. None of their relationships turned out okay. And not to say that all relationships doing this are bad, but there is a reason they say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I was a bit more traditional than this and genuinely wanted a normal-ish wedding, including more family because we were big on including people. After shooting this highly uncomfortable option down 3 times with this woman, she then tried to proceed to honeymoon ideas. I don't know about you, but the idea of staying in the house with a bunch of families while you are trying to get to baby making is not my cup of tea. Yet, at least 3 times a month, she would tell us that instead of going camping, which we already prepared for by this point, we should go out of state and spend with her family. As creepy as it was that she kept pushing it on us, we held firm and told her no. And after enough times of telling her no, she even tried to guilt trip us into going with her anyway. Even brought it to the point that she turned it into an argument at this point. Like, what? I had never been so confused in my life, and as my husband, I am a semi-non-confrontational person. So having these talks with her was not only annoying but utterly disrespectful to us that she wasn't willing to listen to what we wanted for our honeymoon. We thankfully didn't talk much with her during the honeymoon, and again, like the fools, we assumed she was just having a bad week or something. But from here, the lies started to become apparent, and everything was put into perspective. The straw that broke the camel's back was my daughter. Want to know more about my crazy step-monster-in-law? Stay tuned for part 4: Serpents, Coils, and Baby Mama Issues.
This story is going to get interesting and thrilling with each part, so don't miss out on the twists and turns in each of these parts. See you in the next part 4: Serpents, Coils, and Baby Mama Issues. Stay safe and stay